Hello, I'm Amanda Walker and welcome to Inside America, the show that brings you insight and analysis of the biggest issues facing the United States right now. In today's episode, 2 years on from the attack that sparked a devastating war, can a US-brokered peace deal finally bring an end to the bloodshed? Hamas's shock incursion on October 7th, 2023, killed more than 1,000 Israelis. Israel's response has killed tens of thousands of Palestinians and caused a dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Donald Trump's peace plan includes an immediate ceasefire, an exchange of hostages, Israeli withdrawal, and Hamas disarmament, all overseen by him.
My plan calls for the creation of a new international oversight body, the Board of Peace. So it will be headed by a gentleman known as President Donald J. Trump of the United States.
Coming up, we meet Palestinian activists here in Washington, D.C., who say while Donald Trump talks peace on the world stage, his administration is making it harder for them to speak out.
Our own rights in this country are under attack.
Does your future feel uncertain? Do you feel safe?
I don't feel safe.
And we talked to a former State Department official who resigned over US arms supplies to Israel.
There is an inextricable link between American technology and, in most cases, American taxpayer money and all of the harm that is being done with weapons in Gaza.
So, it's been 2 years since October 7th, and the war that followed in Gaza has become one of the deadliest and most divisive global crises in a generation. The Trump administration continues to arm Israel, even as civilian death tolls soar and international outrage grows. Now, while political debate rages, just a few miles from the White House, one Palestinian restaurant is keeping the focus on identity, culture, and resilience. It's called Nabiha. And for founder Nasreen Abaza, visibility, protest, and solidarity all begin around the table. Welcome to Nabiha. Opened just over a year ago, it's a relatively new entry to DC's buzzy neighborhood restaurant scene. But this is not the dream of a career chef. It's a political statement on behalf of Palestine. Sitting down for a meal here can be an act of protest and a platform for solidarity. Palestinian founder and owner Nasreen Abaza is the heart and soul of this place. The kitchen is her front line.
Our mission as a family, as a restaurant, is to invite people to come and see us as human beings. We're not bodies on the TV screen. We have a culture, we have a history, we have a land, we have a flag, and we're not going anywhere. And it's really to keep our voices loud. It became more of a community center, and also it became a center for healing for a lot of people.
So it's not just about food, it's about celebrating the Palestinian culture that's been so eclipsed by violence and suffering. People gather here once a week to learn tatriz, the centuries-old Palestinian tradition of embroidery.
Taught from generation to generation to generation.
At the center is Sophia, also Palestinian and a server at Nabiha by day, organizer and teacher by night. For her, stitching is not just cultural preservation. It's a necessary part of the struggle.
I think it's been so important for us to feel like we are engaging in a practice continuously, repetitively, and with a lot of intention and presence, which allows us to continue the struggle and continue the fight. I always like to tell this to other organizers, to be able to kind of take a breath, find ways, tangible, meaningful ways to be productive and to take action. And for a lot of us, tatriz feels like taking that breath.
These classes aren't the only way Sophia's students are expressing their solidarity with the Palestinian cause.
This is my first one. I'm very proud of it.
Julia has started a collective building relationships with young people in Gaza.
I've just actually asked one of my friends, Ferris, like if people can't donate, what is the best way for them to, support? And he said, just to pray for us and to keep us in your thoughts all the time. And I think that goes a lot further than people even realize.
These people are united in their shared horror at what the world has been witnessing.
Just how would you characterize the past 2 years? How would you describe it?
Yeah, traumatic. I think it's unfathomable, inhumane. Within our people, we have hope. We have real communities, but our government has failed us. Our world leaders have failed us.
But having seen pro-Palestinian activists being punished, not everyone feels comfortable speaking out. What's it like being a Palestinian American in the US right now?
Our own rights in this country are under attack. They have been for the last 2 years, I think especially now. For example, with this new bill that Marco Rubio is trying to introduce, where different forms of speech, pro-Palestine speech, could lead to passport being revoked, being denaturalized, quote unquote.
Does your future feel uncertain? Do you feel safe?
I don't feel safe, and every day it's harder and harder to I think, grasp really what the red line is, if that makes sense.
Nazreen says she will never stop speaking out. Her vision of a free Palestine is not the same as Donald Trump's. And what goes through your mind when you hear him talk about this Riviera and waterfront condos?
Well, I think it shows exactly who he is. People think that Trump is for America. He's not for America. He's for Trump. He wants to own, as if it's up to him to decide that he can own a country or he can own a land, as if the Palestinians have nothing to say about it. Or, yeah, we're going to give them $9,000. You're going to live better and go somewhere else. Why don't you do that to Israel? Why don't you offer Israel New York? They can have Brooklyn.
Is Donald Trump capable of bringing a ceasefire?
I think under pressure, he might.
By what means?
I'm not sure yet. I'm holding hope that, I'll be honest with you, I think the Arab countries have failed, and the Arab countries have the power to put pressure on Trump. And this is Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar. All Arab countries have not taken any steps to really impact Trump. Giving him an airplane, Qatar gave him an airplane as a present. That's pretty shameful when a genocide is taking place. So I think it's time for the Arabs to step up.
So that's the view of Palestinian Americans and activists here in DC. And while there has been much vocal grassroots opposition to Israel's actions in Gaza, successive administrations under Joe Biden and Donald Trump have not wavered in their support. But some within government have dissented. Josh Paul is a former director within the State Department's Bureau of Political Military Affairs. He resigned his position just days after October 7th in protest over America's arming of Israel. I asked him how he views the situation now.
Well, it's been for 2 years now an unfolding catastrophe, and one that has not let up for a single day. And it has been not only a disaster for the Palestinian people, but it has also been a catastrophe for America's global standing. It has been a period that has done immense and perhaps lasting damage to what we knew as the rules-based international order. And it is a period in which as well we have seen repression spread to America when it comes to speech in support of Palestinian humanity. So by all accounts, it's been an absolute disaster.
You resigned from the State Department because of arms being transferred by America to Israel, which in itself is, of course, nothing new. But take us back to that moment. What was going on and what pushed you over the edge specifically?
But there were two things that actually were new at the time I resigned in October of 2023. The first was the incredible use of those weapons to kill so many innocent civilians in Gaza. By the time I left, there were already 3,500 people who had been killed, almost all of them, if not all of them at that point, by American weapons dropped from American planes. The second thing that was new was an unwillingness within the US government to even question our actions, to pause and to think whether this was in America's interest, whether this was indeed legal, but rather just a continued rush to provide these weapons.
What kind of weapons are being supplied and how are they being used?
So the weapons that are being supplied, and this has been continuous, in fact, even as we speak, there is a new arms transfer package moving forward for Israel of several $billion, constitute everything from the fighter jets that have dropped every single bomb on Gaza, to the bombs themselves, the guidance kits that accompany the bombs, the engines that power the IDF tanks, many of the firearms.
So is there a realistic path to use arms supply leverage to obtain a ceasefire, and what would it look like?
So there has been a realistic path there since day one. Under US law, the President of the United States can suspend any arms transfer at any time for any reason. And in any other context, indeed, the US would long ago have said, we are going to pause or stop the supply of munitions until you come into compliance with international law, until you admit the humanitarian assistance that is so urgently needed. That tool is available, but the administrations have not been willing to use it.
Why?
Again, I think because of the domestic politics, because of the pressures that exist, that to be critical of Israel is career suicide, will result in you not getting elected, will be result in a loss of funding for your campaigns. I think that calculus is beginning to shift. And to accelerate that shift is why I and another of those who resigned from the Biden administration, Tarek Habash, founded a new policy to lobby on behalf of a change in American approach. But it is going to take time, and we're going to have to demonstrate that indeed the American politics has changed and the incentive structures have changed before more politicians are willing to demonstrate the courage that we wish our elected officials would have to begin with.
What kind of response have you had to that notion that supporting Israel in this way might not be the best way forward?
So the thing is that behind closed doors, certainly in my own experience in the State Department and since leaving, in talking to elected officials across Capitol Hill and on both sides of the aisle, almost everyone will agree that our approach is wrong-headed, harmful, illegal. The problem is that very few of them, although it's an increasing number, will actually say so publicly. But I do think that most people who take any sort of in-depth look at this situation and at these issues understand that what we are doing is so desperately out of sync with certainly the values we espouse, also with our own national interests. I think we've seen a significant shift in the American public and on both sides of the aisle. We see certainly the Democratic base, massive shift, over 80% now support the suspension of arms transfers to Israel. On the Republican side too, many are asking why we are essentially putting our own interests second to those of a foreign country and to those of Prime Minister Netanyahu. This is beginning to filter up into American politics.
The Trump administration's vision for what's next, the notion of a Riviera, which has been spoken about, has been shown in videos, which we saw earlier in the program. You've spoken very forcefully about that, saying you cannot build a Riviera on the bones of the dead. Can you expand on that for me?
Yes, so first let's be clear. Gaza urgently needs a ceasefire, it urgently needs the free flow of humanitarian assistance, and it needs reconstruction. The problem with the approach that Mr. Trump and behind him people like Jared Kushner and Tony Blair are advancing is twofold. The first is that it inserts and asserts a foreign control, a Western colonialism, frankly, over Gaza in much the same way as we saw previously in Iraq. and is driven by corporate interests, by profiteering. It is ultimately not there to serve the interests of the Palestinian people. How could a notion driven by Jared Kushner, supported by Benjamin Netanyahu, be there to drive the interests of the Palestinian people? The second problem is that it completely divorces itself from any concept of justice. Justice and accountability is a vital part of any sort of sustainable peace. But not only does this plan not include accountability, if you look through the details of it, it actually directs the Palestinian Authority that they cannot retain control or take back control of Gaza until they end their efforts to bring justice through the international legal system. So far from being a mechanism to advance justice, it is a contradiction of it.
And if those mounting confirmations of genocide are not having an impact, what will?
So ultimately, I think it comes down, as many things do in politics, to a question of self-interest. And this is where, as I say, I think that the American people can very clearly see that it is not in their own self-interest for billions of our tax dollars at a time when we see a rise in costs of living, a homelessness crisis, a Medicare crisis, to be sent overseas to kill children. And I think as our politicians increasingly absorb the harm that is being done to America's credibility on the global stage and our ability to lead, I think that will shift this country as well. But it is ultimately going to come down to those, unfortunately, individual calculations by our elected officials of not what is in the interest of humanity, but what is in their own self-interest.
That was Josh Paul, who resigned his position in the State Department over US military support for Israel. Now, he thinks the tide is shifting when it comes to US public support for Israel. Let's discuss that and more with our panel, Dr. Usama Abu Arshid, the Executive Director of Americans for Justice in Palestine Action, and Dr. Thomas Warwick, a former senior advisor to the US Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs and a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Welcome to you both. I just want to start with this New York Times poll. So it does show a marked change in public opinion. In October 2023, 47% of American voters sided with Israel, 20% with Palestinians. Now, in 2025, you have 34% for Israel, 35% for Palestinians. 6 out of 10 voters say Israel should end its military campaign, even if the remaining Israeli hostages were not released or Hamas was not eliminated. And 40% say that Israel is intentionally killing civilians in Gaza. That's nearly double the number of voters who agreed with this statement in 2023. Thomas, give us your take on that.
So among Democrats especially, there was large support for the position Kamala Harris took during the presidential campaign, in which she said that Israel has a right to defend itself, but how it does so really matters. And certainly the images that we saw over the summer of starving children in Gaza after the changes in how humanitarian aid was distributed had a big impact on American popular opinion, and indeed on President Trump, who spoke starting back in April that Israel needed to increase its humanitarian aid to Gaza. So that's had an effect, but we'll obviously have to see where things go as a result of the peace plan that President Trump announced on Monday.
Osama, do you think that the Trump administration is likely to shift its position if public opinion continues in that direction?
I don't think this administration really cares much about the public opinion. But the president now is feeling the pressure from his own base, from the MAGA base, that questions his allegiance to his America First slogan as opposed to Israel first. That's one. Two, I think Trump is obsessed now with this Nobel Peace Prize, and he's obsessed that he's the only individual, the only person who can solve unsolvable problems. And he's always in that constant mode of contrasting himself with Biden. Where Biden failed, he wants to succeed.
Osama, are you surprised by the extent to which America has supported Israel throughout the past 2 years? You know, this show is about looking back over what has happened since October 7th, 2023. What have your observations been about the US role?
No, I'm not surprised, because it's a constant in the American politics since 1917. Now, what we've seen since 2023 is that this support was out of control, was on steroid, where America was willing to jeopardize its national security interest, its international standing, in favor of a foreign entity. This happened under Biden, who's a Democrat, and it continues to happen under Trump, who's a Republican. So I'm not surprised when it comes to this level of complicity. But what I'm surprised at is the shift in the American public opinion. We used to talk about the shift within Democrats, within progressives, within Gen Zs, within younger Americans. Now it's across the board, even within the Republican Party. Those who are under 50 are more, within the Republican Party, are more critical of Israel as opposed to those who are above 50.
Let's talk a bit about the need for a plan based on past experience. How crucial is it to not repeat mistakes of the past in this situation?
As somebody who is involved in United States post-war reconstruction efforts, starting in Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, East Timor, I've left several out, Iraq again after 2014, there are some lessons that are really important for the world to understand as we look at what could happen in Gaza. Whether Hamas fully complies with what Trump has said or not. This is going to mean parts of Gaza that are now secured are going to be put under international administration. There will be an international security force providing security, preventing Hamas from retaking control over territory, and then the Israeli army will leave those areas. One of the lessons learned is reconstruction done fast and cheap never works. And although we haven't seen the full details of what former Prime Minister Tony Blair has put forward, this is the concern many of us have. Gaza's reconstruction, as everyone who watches this channel knows, is going to be an enormous undertaking, physically and socially. The idea of a small number of internationals working with an as yet unknown committee of Gazans really does make people worry that the scale of this effort needs to be much greater than what people are talking about. So if there's any advice that I would be able to give, it's you need to have this fully resourced, and you've got to have it ready to go almost on day one.
It's a huge, monumental task. Osama, I want your take on, do you think what level, if any, of autonomy will Gazans have in these proposals that we're seeing?
Well, it seems there is no autonomy, because this entity of a technocrat Palestinian committee that would be created will have more of a municipality roles as opposed to a governing role. It will be overseen by the so-called Board of Peace,
right,
headed by Donald Trump and Tony Blair. So there is no autonomy. And in fact, you know, the Palestinian quest for a state is not an aspiration. It is a right. It is a moral and a legal right. So Donald Trump, the United States, Israel don't have the right to confiscate the Palestinians' aspiration and right to have a state. So this establishment of a trusteeship or some of colonial, imperial body to oversee the Palestinian is an insult to the right of Palestinians to have the right of self-determination and to govern themselves. How would you justify that the Palestinians are not even involved in the negotiations? It's not a negotiation.
Well,
it's being imposed on the Palestinians. Take it or leave it.
Well,
not only on Hamas, even on the PA. It's being imposed on them. Take it or leave it. And what Trump promised, that hell is going to occur. Hell is going to befalling the Palestinians if you refuse
Hamas.
our ultimatum.
He said Hamas.
I
not
mean,
the
we've
Palestinians.
seen how Israel
We've
interprets
talked
this.
about
I'm
lessons
sorry, but when
learned
you say
from previous
Israel
conflicts. Can I just
killed
talk about Iraq, for example?
over 65,000
We've learned
civilians
lessons there.
in Gaza.
If you're not involving the Palestinians, can this ever work?
Well, one of the criticisms that is fair is that in all of the negotiations that the international mediators have had, they have been talking to Hamas, not to Palestinians. It became very apparent from all of the opinion polling that has been done in Gaza and in the West Bank, starting even after October of 2023, that there is a division. The people of Gaza have a very different view, certainly from the people in the West Bank, but especially from Hamas. And in a survey done in May, there was a small plurality that was actually in favor of an international governance of Gaza if it would mean that the Israeli army would leave. And so one of the criticisms that I and others expressed was the idea there should have been negotiations with Palestinians, not just with Hamas. That would give a better understanding of what has gone on.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Osama, both for your time. Well, it's been 2 long years of violence and suffering. There's so much hope that the war in Gaza may finally come to an end, but as you've heard, there are still significant political obstacles to peace. We'll continue to monitor developments from here in Washington, D.C. That's Inside America for today. Thanks for watching.